the 13th chapter.
Glory to you, Lord.
Now Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath. And just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. She was bent over and quite unable to stand up straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." When he laid his hands on her, immediately she stood up straight and began praising God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had cured on the Sabbath, kept saying to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be cured, and not on the Sabbath day." But the Lord answered him and said, "You hypocrites! Does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away and give it water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 long years, be set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day?" When Jesus said this, all his opponents were put to shame, and the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things that he was doing. This is the gospel of our Lord. Praise to you, Lord Christ. You may be seated. Isn't it satisfying when Jesus sticks it to the leadership? They don't know how wrong they are, those people who are part of a religious group, who have become supporters of the institution, the ones keeping everyone in line, the ones following the rules. They don't know how wrong they are, those hypocrites. Well, if Jesus were here right now, you hypocrites could very well be us. Now, there is a lot happening in this gospel reading this morning, with the mention of differing ability in that not great term crippled, and the history and the phrase of daughter of Abraham, and the mention of personified evil and the reference to Satan, and bondage in terms of being stuck in that situation. There is a lot going on. So the point in all of this is what needs changing. What shakes us up and needs change? Because we are leaving out some people by our lack of accommodations, by our lack of engaging the intentional work of inclusion. It is so easy to get comfortable. While taking an online class this summer on equity, diversity, and inclusion, EDI as it's called professionally, I've been invited to reflect variously on authentic community, and genuine inclusivity. You know, we do pretty well here at Hills of Peace. But we could always offer better. We are only as inclusive a community as we are to the people that we are excluding or not making room for. Differently abled, sharing a message we might not want to hear, deemed to be of the devil, generally excluded by society. Jesus and the woman in today's story are all of these. Differently abled, sharing a message we might not want to hear, deemed to be of the devil, generally excluded by society. Whenever we we are keeping out any one person. We are keeping out many, many more. But Jesus always shows up anyway. Closed doors, fish breakfasts on the beach, broken families set at odds in their faithfulness. Now today, in the main teaching place of the community, the religious center, this is the message we're invited to carry. Jesus shows up. Beloved followers of Christ, tell everyone you're not alone. Remind your friends, God is with you. Say to the folks who are struggling right now, you have an advocate no matter what. In you, through you, God is showing the world that the presence of Christ is everywhere. Truly, while still hypocrites and sometimes kind of proud of it, we are also the ones who have been freed, changed by Christ. Our lives are freed for praising God and living for neighbors. But it's not always as easy as that. In what I'm about to share, a young person describes their experience of living with a disability after having polio at 2.5 years old. I was born like any other child. When I was 2.5 years old, polio came into my life and changed the course of my life and gave me a visible label that has attracted discrimination to me all my life. My right leg was affected, and this meant that walking became difficult and painful. It's not easy to live with a physical disability. It is draining on one's emotions, specifically because not enough people understand what we face socially, health-wise, politically, culturally, economically, the physical and the emotional barriers, and so much more. It is good that people are now being sensitized about discrimination and social exclusion of disabled persons in society. Once each and every one of us is aware of the special needs of the physically challenged persons in society, it won't be as difficult as it is now to naturally make and implement laws and policies that will build an inclusive society. I was 5 years old when I started to notice that other kids usually stared and pointed at me whenever I walked, and that some parents in our neighborhood dragged their kids away when they tried to play with me. At a point, I stopped trying to join others in their games when one of the other kids told their mom, and her mom said God had punished my parents by making me walk that way. They were to run away or I would transfer the curse to their parents. I told my mom, who hugged me, and said they were lying, that I was to play in the house from that day on. I started school, and on my first day, my parents watched with fear and pride in their eyes as I stumbled along with the other pupils. As young as I was, I knew not to tell them. The other kids used to laugh at me. I had no one to counsel me or support me. I felt alone amongst my peers. I got into university later on, and by now my dad deemed it wise to stop driving me to and fro from school. I was to start learning to survive on my own. He customized a car for me and converted the foot pedals to hand controls. It was when I decided to contest for the post of treasurer at the School of Accounting and Business Studies that I faced twofold discrimination as a consequence of both my gender and my disability. I was told by a majority of lecturers and other students that the not meant for a woman. And more importantly, my being physically challenged would not let me represent the school or students well. My few friends and lecturers rallied around me and made sure my campaign was hitch-free. I won the election. After several years of sacrifice, tears, and pain in school, I finally graduated. My disability is only a part of who I am. But because it is so incredibly visible, I feel too many people tend to concentrate on that alone, and that is very sad. I might be physically challenged, but that has not made me less whole or less of a woman. The stares are sometimes the cruelest of all. Admittedly, I have got used to being stared at. And I know this is true, because when there are other people with me, they comment constantly on the people staring, and I didn't even notice. There are those that stare out of curiosity. That ends just as quickly as it started. There are the persistent, rude stares that follow you for a whole minute or 5. Then there are the poor girl stares. But my favorite is the stare with a smile followed by, hello. I rarely get those. I'm not saying it's been totally darkness all through, as I have met some good souls who have one way or the other tried to make my life more bearable for me. But most of all, I encourage you hearing this. Just give a nice smile and say hello. Even with protected laws and rights in these days, so many are excluded. We know, and we heard it again today, we are all set free. Nothing needs to hold us back. Christ is with us and sends us out to be present with all who are oppressed, to set each other free and break down every barrier. So why do we hesitate? The world needs us. So many need us to live boldly in naming, God is here. This coming week, we are celebrating so many in Kamloops who are God's beloved and beautiful people. Pride Week is about recognizing that we are set free. Free to be who we are, free to be included, free to have pride and confidence in God's accepting, nurturing love for us. And the gift for us in knowing that every human is named God's beloved, knit in the womb. This is freedom. We are not bound by anything that might have previously excluded people on account of religious rules. We are set free. God's freeing us is beyond church institutions and laws. It's in you, through you. God is showing the world that the presence of Christ is everywhere. So, go out there, give a nice smile, and say hello.